The year is 2013, and Bioware had been steadily releasing update after update for Star Wars The Old Republic. After its first expansion, Rise of the Hutt Cartel, earlier that year, players were given the universally praised Dread War update in October. As I mentioned in my retrospective covering that update, the SWTOR community had been very hopeful about the future of the game since 2.0's release. While it wasn't perfect, it was received fairly well. Arguably, the Dread War update got more hype and praise. Even after getting 4 operations that year, parts of the MMO didn't feel complete. It was getting close, but a few things were still missing. Before we dive into each mini expansion, as I like to call them, I want to give more definition to the term complete for this particular era in SWTOR. So each class had their own starship. The Force users would share the same one, and the Tech users got their own, which in my opinion were a lot cooler. These starships didn't just serve as a vessel to fly from system to system. It was a hub for your companions, a place to have romances and other conversations with said companions. It was a cargo hold access point, and for the wealthy at that time, you could even have a GTN in your ship. Also a mailbox. There was a console where you could load up these single-player space missions, and by doing these missions, you could get better upgrades for your ship so that you could complete more difficult challenges. By all accounts, the space missions were not very popular. I can't think of many people who would set aside time to complete them outside of the completionists. I don't think anyone actively disliked these missions. It was more of a mini game to play before heading off to your next adventure. The ship was your personal home at that point. Some players had been asking for some ship-to-ship combat, but it was a small portion of the community. And at this time, there was really only one real hub for all players to hang out at, the Imperial and Republic fleets. Bioware had spent a lot of time creating these universal hubs for each faction. The fleet had everything you could ever need: gear upgrades, cosmetic items, speeder sails, VIP spaces, and more. Basically, after level 10, you'd spend a majority of your time after questing, raiding, or PvPing on the fleet's outer rings, whether you needed a training dummy or were running around looking for the main operation door. I always thought that this was a mistake, because if you take the time, you can see that the devs had put a lot of these cool cantinas all across the galaxy. You'd really only stop in these rest zones when leveling your characters or maybe role-playing. Nowadays, these spots sit mostly empty. If you weren't on the fleet, maybe you were in your ship. I think the key point here is that Bioware had a lot of cool places to hang out in, but didn't do the greatest job at incentivizing players to do so. And now with that context given, we can dive into the game's first mini expansion, Galactic Starfighter. Bioware released Galactic Starfighter to early access players on December 3rd, 2013, and January 14th, 2014 for non-subscribers. This introduced a 12v12 space PvP on a few maps with different ships to choose from. Scouts had high speed, but were squishy. Strike fighters were basically the jack-of-all-trades type of thing. Gunships were long-distance railgun annoyances, and bombers just made objectives easier, if you know what I mean. The name I had come up with for this release was the expansion nobody really asked for. I don't mean that in a negative way for the most part. I was surprised when we got this announcement and was excited to see more PvP elements in the game, as that was what I spent the first 2 years of the game doing most of the time. Players had wanted some more from Bioware though. This was a cool update for sure, but not a high priority on the list for the community at the time. I spent about 10 total hours with this content since its initial release. It was a nice way to change things up, Yes, it had its own dailies and weeklies, ship requisition to continue to upgrade and customize, and it was nice not to do Section X or Black Hole runs when I could just jump into this for a little bit. It was a great game mode to mess around with friends. Outside of the dedicated GSF community though, I don't think anyone took this very seriously. Not even Bioware would pay much attention to it after its launch, but nevertheless, it was an important update in my opinion. And I'll explain why a little later on. As I said, while it wasn't a need for the community at the time, it was just another notch on the belt for the many things that you could do in the Old Republic. If anyone watching was an avid GSF player or still plays it actively today, I would love to hear your thoughts and your experience in the comment section. Just 2 months after GSF's official release, Bioware redeemed itself with the update announcement that honestly changed SWTOR in one of the most underrated ways ever. Game Update 2.10 Galactic Strongholds. If you remember back to the context I had given earlier in the video, there were really only 2 places where players could interact, on the fleet or their personal starship. Community space wasn't necessarily limited, but it wasn't used very well, and it wasn't incentivized to be used in any other way outside of maybe resting up or role-playing. I remember going to a meeting of my guild at the time, the Unmasked Rebellion, on the Zyos Shadow. Some NoblePlays lore here. This is where I would become the PvP officer. It was the greatest moment of my life at that point. I bring this up because there weren't a lot of private and personalized spaces for players to go, at least as far as guilds were concerned. They didn't really have their own home. The player had a ship, but that still couldn't have 50 to 100 people on it. The MMORPG serves as a second life for most people, not a home away from home, but a second home. Strongholds weren't just a home though. They were a place to show off your various achievements in-game. Bioware had struck gold with the Galactic Strongholds update. At launch, we had strongholds for Dromenkas, Coruscant, Nar Shaddaa, and Tatooine. And to make things even better, guilds also had access to their own flagships, which at the time cost about 50 million credits, not to mention any additional room unlocks which costed more, just like with player versions of their strongholds. These strongholds served as community homes for many guilds and players. The update didn't launch without its issues. We started out with not great hook placement and, in my opinion, just not enough hooks overall. I'll give credit where it's due though. They had a nice starter quest that gave you some basic looking decorations. It wasn't much, but it got you started.
Live in a manner appropriate to your lofty status while also supporting the Republic. Strengthen your political connections and expand your influence in the galaxy like never before with your own strategically located stronghold. Use your stronghold to build a power base, guard against your enemies. Heck, throw a party, throw lots of parties. Make your success known. Is it hyperbole to suggest that owning and showing off a stronghold might be the most important thing you ever do for the Republic? That isn't for me to say. Buy your stronghold now. Do it for the Republic and for yourself. You are a powerful figure on the galactic stage. Powerful figures attract powerful enemies. Shield yourself from your enemies. Broaden your sphere of influence. Wield your prosperity as a weapon. Accomplish all of this and more with strongholds. Procure a location from across the galaxy to construct your new power base. Adorn your stronghold in stunning opulence. and immerse yourself in gratification as the seething resentment and abject fear of your adversaries wash over you. Be ever in service to the Empire. Show your worth. Brandish your power. Secure a stronghold now.
Now, most of the decorations people get in game today are through buying them off the Cartel market. This has always been a thing for the most part. There are some decorations that can only be acquired through achievements or galactic reputation, but a lot of the coolest stuff you'll have to fork over that credit card, which is not a bad thing. The game has to make money somehow. SWTOR's prices for decorations isn't the most outrageous though. There are some other MMOs that charge way more for the premium decos. No system is perfect. Housing in MMOs is one of the more underrated or maybe underappreciated features, I think. Some games do it better than others, I'll admit, but I think personal bias will get in the way no matter who you ask. We all like to think that our game of choice had the best of everything, in most cases. Galactic Strongholds was a pivotal update for the Old Republic because it brought something important to the player base. It gave us permanence. When you logged on, you didn't log into the fleet or a planet. You started your adventures where you started the day, at home, a place you built for yourself or your friends. I had this one friend who would never stop decorating. She would finish group dailies and then immediately head back to her Tatooine stronghold and figure out new ways to place the items and make a space unique to her. When we weren't running hard mode False Emperor, we were hanging out in someone's stronghold, sitting in raid call and TeamSpeak, talking about God knows what. It was a great way to just enjoy being in the galaxy, and it still is to this day. One thing I will give Bioware credit for is that they figured out a balancing act. They didn't want players to not have a reason to visit the Republic or Imperial fleets, but they also wanted to give players the space just to be by themselves, away from the chaotic Imperial fleet chat, away from the hundreds of players on various planets questing and PvPing. They gave us cargo hold, legacy bay, and guild storage access, along with GTN and mail. You had a lot of amenities, but when it came time to upgrade gear, mess with crew skills, find cosmetic gear vendors, you had to go back into the galaxy, into those shared spaces where all players roamed. I believe Bioware did the best they could with this, and I think it's worked out well. Strongholds have come a long way since they launched. There are so many now that I pick a new place to live every time I come back for a few months. And while I haven't touched Galactic Starfighter in many years outside of putting what I needed to get done here for the video, I can appreciate what the devs were trying to do with it. Both Galactic Starfighter and Galactic Strongholds sealed the deal for the foundation of a game that has lasted for almost 15 years. Had it not been for these updates, we may have never reached the golden age of SWTOR, which I will cover next. This was the start of said golden age. And if you were to ask any veteran of this game, I think some of them would say that these updates, maybe not by themselves, but combined, kept them playing long term. I'm not sure about Galactic Starfighter though. I will say Galactic Strongholds was that update for me. I had never planned to leave the game, but adding Stronghold and a place to permanently call home for my time in the game, that pretty much solidified that I would be on this game until the servers shut down. But that does it for the retrospective today, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Tell me about your experiences in the game. What stronghold are you on currently? What's your favorite stronghold? And if you did play Galactic Starfighter, I do want to hear about that. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. My name is Noble. I will see you all in the next one. Peace.